Hello, and welcome to today's live session, Navigating the Challenges of Testing at Scale, Lessons from Top Performing Teams. Today, have an outstanding panel of hands-on technical leaders joining us for what we expect to be a lively discussion. Our moderator for this discussion is Andrew Knight. Andrew Pandy Knight is the automation panda and a software quality champion who loves to help people build better quality software. He is our principal developer advocate here at Applitools and the director of Test Automation University. An avid supporter of open source software, Pandy is also a Playwright ambassador and the lead developer for Boa Constrictor, the .NET screenplay package.
Sure am. Thank you so much for being here today. As Pam said, I'm Andy Knight. I'm the panda. Y'all probably know me. I'm so excited to be hosting this panel about testing at scale. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I've had some pretty cool experiences with this kind of stuff myself, but I want to introduce our other esteemed speakers so that you can hear from them rather than hear my trap keep yapping. So what I would like to do to kind of kick off our discussion today is I want to introduce each of our four wonderful panel speakers. Just invite them to tell you each one by one who they are, where they work, and the kind of testing project they've done or that they're currently working on or have done in the past. So Mike, let's start with you, my friend.
Welcome. Hello, everybody. I am Mike Milgate. I have been in the industry for quite some time. I've made quite a nice career out of testing and quality. I come in from Everfi, which is an online education platform for K-12. Everfi from Blackbaud, excuse me. And I am the manager, quality director over the homeroom K-12 platform for the Everfi organization. I'll give more detail about things I've worked on as we go further into this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike. Really great to have you here. All right, next, Harika, tell us what's up.
Hi, Andy. Hello, everyone. And I'm Harika Tata. I'm having over 15 plus years of experience in testing, starting from manual, automation, security, whatnot, everything you can point it in everything. And then currently I was working as a lead automation engineer in Eversana InTouch. And Eversana InTouch is a digital marketing specialized in healthcare profession. So we do offer digital marketing and advertising services to all the pharmaceutical and healthcare companies. So we'll be focusing on delivering the strategies, creating websites, mobile apps, mobile sites, implementing social media campaigns, and utilizing data and analytics and optimizing all the marketing efforts. So you would think what type of scenarios will be coming into those and what type of challenges we would be facing, how we rectified those things in this session.
Nice, man. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Harika. All right. Third speaker we're going to go to is Jose. Jose, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hello, Andy, and hello, everyone. It's nice to be here with you. So my name is Jose Morales. I am working as an automation architect at Domino's. And as you can imagine, we have all kinds of products. We have products that run in browsers. We have products in the mobile applications, and that means the two flavors, iOS and Android. We have also standalone applications that we have in the stores. If you go to a Domino's stores, we have some applications running there, and we have also applications running in the Chrome devices. So we have all the flavors, and it's a very kind of challenging, but so far I'm doing pretty well.
Nice. That's awesome to hear. All right, and our final speaker, Felipe. Welcome to the stage. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me, and hello, everyone. I'm Felipe. I've been in tech for roughly 20 years now, like mostly in testing, and the past 6 years at Netflix, where I'm a senior STAT on the TV UI team. So basically building features around like discovery and playback on the TV UI platform, which is the one that runs on streaming devices, like all the streaming sticks, the video game consoles, and so on. So only on the TV space. On my free time, I also like to contribute to open source projects, and nowadays mostly around the Bitcoin space, which is a very interesting area that has lots of interesting testing challenges there. And that's what keeps my mind fresh and exposed to other things beyond the streaming, which is very challenging on its own. And we're going to be talking more about that during the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Felipe. And thank you all for being here. So before I ask the first question, I also want to note all 4 of our esteemed speakers are also newly minted Applitools ambassadors. So we're very glad to have them part of our program. It's really exciting times for us as a company. And we're just grateful that y'all want to talk with us and share your experience for everybody who's attending. Because, I mean, I've been doing this 15 years, 20 years. I'm just like, dang, I've been doing it for like 12. Feel like a lightweight. Alrighty. So for today's discussion, we're going to talk, like I said, about testing at scale. And we're going to try to navigate the conversation around 3 main points. Looking at test cases, looking at test data, and then also looking at test execution. So the first question I want to ask is around test cases. And so Felipe, since you were last up to introduce yourself, I'm going to pick on you to be first for this question. How do you design test cases that don't break when testing large-scale products and platforms?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think like it all starts with like understanding your domain, understanding your application, understanding the challenges that you will have. It doesn't even have to be at scale, but just understanding what could be flaky, what can break, and what can you try to push down to other layers of your testing strategy. You don't have to do everything at the UI level, as we all know. We can leverage things like visual testing to not have to rely a lot on like writing the code to do all the assertions at the DOM level or or instrument your application a lot, so that you can read details about the state of the app throughout your testing, which can also change. The implementation details will change over time, so you don't want to have your test tied to your implementation. You want to have it at a higher level when you can, but also pushing down to other layers, as I said, like API levels, the unit testing when you can, when it makes sense. But you can only think about all of those things and all those strategies once you know what you're testing and what your customers and what's important to your business as well. So I would try to prioritize first thinking of the scenarios that you can't have fail ever, like those that are the most critical to your business, and start there and make it very strong and reliable that those tests should always pass. I also like thinking about having like a testing budget. So instead of testing absolutely everything about your application and about your feature, think of this surface area that you want to cover and see how much you want to run, let's say in a given during a given time, let's say 15 minutes. What are the most important things you want to run within those 15 minutes? And if you can't run things within that time frame, then you have the scaling issues that you're getting to on the test execution front. Like, do you want to scale your infra? Do you want to improve the way that we're doing the actual testing? Like, let's say, waiting less throughout the test or moving it to other places, and then try to optimize for that time that you want to have your test run. And always go back to reviewing if your tests are still providing value, if they make sense to be running at the level that they are running and at the frequency that they are running, because those will take time, those will take money, and infra costs to run. So it's not about like having everything running all the time. Like, you really want to be smart and effective on what is important, what is critical, and what has to absolutely be there. And then start to offload some of those tests to your infra, to your cloud, in a way that will be running within that time slot and always reliably.
Awesome answer. You covered all of the buttons or the check boxes. That was great. So add to that what he said, right? It's hard to answer or add to the flavor of what's being discussed there, because that's really a technique that's used when you've been around for a while. That's really getting to know your application, getting to know your testing speeds, getting to know the priorities of your applications is really key to understand and how to be successful moving forward. One, you said it, I posted it in the comments, the testing budget. I've never heard that term before. I actually really like that term, so I'm going to see how I can incorporate it into my language as well. So thank you for sharing that, Felipe. What I would add from our perspective at Everfi, what we are doing is very similar techniques. I'm happy to say even this morning, I was evaluating some of our daily automation jobs that we have set up, and some of that logic hasn't been paid attention to. And so they've been failing for a while, and we haven't been really good citizens in our quality citizens in reviewing our tests. And so I actually turned off some jobs this morning. Gives me good feelings to be able to delete some jobs.
So, yeah, to add to both the points, definitely you both covered everything. And what we follow in our thing is we include automation team start of the project, not to the end or anything, because that would create a lot of damage, because we are done with the entire project and we have minimal time frame. So definitely, as Philippi mentioned, that the budgeting and everything should be taken care, and we should be included ahead of time. And I have 7 points which we will look into things when we do a test case. It's like identify the critical and stable functionalities which we need to take care of, and also writing the small and modular test cases, not like having the pages of code in one thing, where we need to identify the reusability of the script. And also, instead of employing the dynamic locators, we need to locate for the robust elements identification. So that is being a critical part, because we don't want to waste our time in re-updating the elements in each environment while we are testing. So, and also we need to prioritize on the risk analysis, and because of all these element dynamic issues, so we need to take care about error handling. And also, what next is maintaining the script, which is more challenging when compared to writing a script. So these are the main things we will take care while writing a test case. So, yep.
All good stuff. I agree completely with all the ideas, and I would like to add only one important concept created by Martin Fowler, that is testing pyramid. Testing pyramid is testing by layers, right? It's important, all the kind of strategies for testing, and all of them are important. Unit testing, integration testing, functional testing, contract testing, all of them are really important. And also grouping those test cases in different strategies, right? As Harika mentioned, it's very important to understand the business. It's very important to understand what is the most important test scenarios. And then you can test under that particular features, grouping that particular test cases and execute them, right? So I think that's a very important concept, and also to have a very easy way to analyze your test cases, right? It's easy to add another scenario. It's easy to change and easy to modify. If not, there is an opportunity to improve. So that's overall what we are doing at Domino's.
That's great.
So then,
sorry.
Yeah, would y'all say it? Oh, it's all good. We're friends here.
Friends.
We're chatting.
We interrupt each other. It's good.
That's right. So I want to key off of something you just said there, right? Historically, I think there was a lot of drive to just post numbers with test cases, right? Oh, well, this sprint, I'm cranking out 25 more test cases, or the next epic, we're going to add 200 test cases for this feature. But I've always felt like it's not so much the quantity of test cases, but rather the value you get from them, the amount of risk they're mitigating, the importance to the critical paths. And this falls in line with what Felipe was saying about like a testing budget. Like you only have so much time to not only develop and maintain, but then to run as well. Maybe it's a 15-minute window. What do y'all think about something like that?
Well, I think just to start, like you mentioned, like not the number of test cases and like bragging about that as something like, oh, I have like 1,000 test cases, but like, what does that actually mean? Like, how does that translate into like assessing risk and preventing risk or preventing regressions to get into a customer's hands? And I was talking to a friend yesterday. He was asking me for some help on how to model like his testing problem. Like he works in infra, so he had like a migration coming up, and he had something like, I have 2 servers, they have to connect to each other. One of them will be one of the test cases is to test it in this authentication style, the other one, this other one thing, this other authentication style here. So he was a bit confused on how to design it. And I told him, hey, have you heard of pairwise testing or combinatory analysis to do this? And his mind was blown by thinking about that. Like he laid out all his variables, all the possible scenarios that he could have. And then the tool that I shared with him just generated all the possible combinations for what servers he had to run, what kind of scenarios he would have for each one of those. And then by using that, he prioritized what was important for him during this sprint or this delivery that his infra team had to come up with. So the output of that ended up to him later was a script that he could run against like his Docker and Kubernetes setup by just creating different images and different conditions. And he was super happy about it because he provided input into what the tool provided him as all these possible scenarios that he didn't even think of because he had no idea that he could combine, let's say, like variation A with B and C. And thinking of that, like it's very error prone. Like you can't, it's very easy for you to forget a scenario. But once you have all the combinations in front of you and you assess, like you provide your input to see what's really important, then he can prioritize and make sure that those primary scenarios are covered and they would be affecting his business. So yeah, it's definitely not a thing about the number of test cases, but really the value that they provide or the value that they prevent you from losing. Let's say if you can't, like if you push out a problem to production and you work in sales, like your metric is going to be like number of sales per second or per minute or whatever. And if you prevent, users can't buy your product, then you have a dollar amount associated to it and what your tests should be covering to prevent that. So you don't have a loss on your company and your any impact to your business. So try to think like beyond the number of test cases, but really what they mean. Like what is the actual impact to you, to your customers, and to your business?
Yeah, definitely agree, Philip.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andy. Yeah.
I was going to say real quick, I like how you say it's not just the value that tests provide, but the value they prevent your business from losing. I thought that was. Sorry, go ahead, Harika.
I agree with that point. It's not like how many tests we ran it, but how much quality we have achieved with is the main focus, because all of us here are looking for some testing and then quality out there. And as you know, for marketing agency as a pharmaceutical company, for us, we have so much of content. So previously we has to write to validate this content is displayed on the site once accordion has been clicked or anything. So, but by using Applitools, we has to reduce our coding test cases level drastically by using one command, because we don't need to go and validate if this pop-up is displayed or this displayed, that displayed. By adding the Applitools, we are able to cover all those things, which has reduced the amount of scripting, which we can focus more on to what else we can do and exploring things. So which has drastically helped us in our testing scope.
All right. So good. Like, how do you repeat that again? Like, I agree again with everything that's being said. So this is a fun conversation to have. But some of the things that I'm talking about, or not what I'm talking about, what my panelist friends here are talking about is key to think about. The approach that I have tried to start taking throughout my career in the last few years is not necessarily focusing on the test cases themselves, but actually looking at the whole overall quality of the ecosystem. So yes, automation is key. And my mantra around automation is basically what I tell people is my job is to work myself out of a job. And what I mean by that is I want the machines to do the work for me so I can go do other things. And that other things is the quality advocacy that we try to do within the organizations that I am employed by. So test cases are a good foundation to start with. And that gives you some runway to start doing other exploratory type testing and doing other types of styles of testing. It gives you time to find the bugs that need to be found. And those bugs might not be application bugs. Those bugs might be repository etiquette, or it could be meeting etiquette as an example, or documentation has fallen behind or something along that line. And having all of those types of things in place helps improve the quality as a whole, which also speeds up our test case execution, which also increases the confidence that the entire team has for the product releases.
In Domino's, we have a rule that is critical bugs are unacceptable. As you can imagine, Domino's is selling a lot of pizza. Just in the Super Bowl, we're selling 2 million of pizzas just in United States, right? So every component is critical. So what we are doing is basically to test different scenarios, we test different strategies. So imagine that you can test on a specific component like payments, like the store, right? Store configuration and the website. But another important is how you connect each component, each other, right? So there is a lot of teams testing all the scenarios, and there is a communication between them to make sure that everything is working as expected. So it's really important to run the test cases, but it's more important to see the results and analyze the results of the test cases, right? So having test cases that adds value. And if you have an automation and most of the test cases are passing, that's good. But if we have some test cases that is failing, it's important to know why it's failing. It's an environment issue, it's a new feature, it's a service that is not working fine. So it's important to analyze logs, screenshots, videos, and different strategies so you can quickly understand where is the problem. So I think that's the key factor for having good test cases.
Yeah, well said. Well said indeed. With the screenshots and the video recordings that you can get, all of that is key into what I was saying earlier as well about quality advocacy, right? The machines do the work for you. Human heads, human minds need to be able to evaluate the value of those test cases. Yes, there's a bunch of buzzwords that are being thrown around as of recent about AI generation and stuff like that. I think that's still a valuable tool and will become valuable to our industry, but I don't think it's the key because human eyes still need to be able to make that educated guess. And using tools like Applitools also helps facilitate that evaluation. So our machines, our test cases are being ran by the machines, which gives us as quality advocates more time to evaluate the results that we're getting from our test cases. Are those good test cases? Throw them away if they're not. Or change them to make them better. Are they running slow? Okay, figure that out. Why are they running slow? Look at your CI integration and look at the times. Look at the insights that you gain from the data that you can get. Utilize these third-party tool applications. Like Applitools, Ultrafast Grid is a key component within our Everfi ecosystem where we execute a variety of different browser sizes, screen sizes. We create one test case and we can run 4, 5, 10, however many browser screens we want to test against. And using that, we can evaluate the test really quickly based on the screenshot that Applitool provides for us.
And Mike, you mentioned like having the machines doing like running the scripts for you, and I feel like that's critical. Like as we're getting more into the running and scaling part of the conversation, one thing that I always struggle with is like let's say you have a bug that slipped into production. Ideally, you would have some tests that will be running to prevent that issue from ever happening again. But maybe the likelihood of that particular failure happening again is very low. But the impact may be high. Like if it ever goes into production again and it's something that you have seen before, that's a shame. Like it's a missed opportunity to have that test running for longer. So do you folks have any cases where like you feel like there are some tests that you have running around and maybe they're costing you time to run and infra to have them around? You may think that they are useless or they're not providing value as much, but the moment that something breaks and you have that just for that particular scenario, and you don't have it running anymore, like how would you feel about that? Like if you got invested into running for another 2 minutes into your test suite, like you could have prevented this major thing from happening again. So do you have any situations like this, like, or any thoughts about how to deal with that? Like it's maybe you have to run in a different cadence, or maybe you don't run, like maybe just once a week should be fine, but like it all depends on your release cycles, right? So you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, great question. From my perspective, the thoughts around that. So you described it, Haruka described it, Jose has described it, like looking and evaluating your test suites and determining the priority of those test cases and the value they provide and the importance of that feature in the application. So we assess our test cases and say, yep, this is what we deem a sanity test. And a sanity test is something that we would be running against production at whatever frequency we need it to run to make sure that production is stable. In the scenario where you're talking about that, oh, we turned off a test, it went into production, how would I feel about that? Well, again, it depends on the priority of that bug or that feature. If it was a high priority feature, I would feel really bad about that. And bad in the sense I'd be super stressed, because when you have some sort of incident like that in production, if you're practicing the quality advocacy techniques within your organization, you would be doing a root cause analysis on why that happened. And then you're going to need to determine how did that get through, right? And it's not just a testing team problem. It's not just a development team problem. It's not a deployment team problem. It's the whole team problem. So we all have to take time to do that root cause analysis. So how do we help prevent that from going forward? We establish sanity tests. We change our priorities when we encounter hot fixes to put guardrails in place for those features if it's a high priority item. And those go into our sanity test suite as well. And yeah, the root cause analysis really beats us up because we got to figure out how to prevent that going forward, right? Again, automation is just going to do what you tell it to do when you tell it to do it. It's not going to find all the problems. So you got to have runway to find that.
Yep. I'd like to jump in here with an answer to your question, Felipe. So at my previous company, we had something like you said about running, off hours, so to speak. The way we handled it is we had a pretty large test suite that we had built up end to end, all that good stuff. We crammed as much high value coverage as we could into a 15-minute continuous test window. And we hyper parallelized this thing. We had a whole Selenium grid. It was beautiful. And so we could run a significant portion of the tests after every commit, and it would be reasonably fast feedback. 15 minutes isn't bad. So that way the developers could catch the issues right away. And basically all the other tests, or the tests that for whatever reason had to be run in serial because they were colliding on test data, we would run those overnight. Why? Because they weren't as urgent. They're still important. They weren't as important. They weren't as urgent. And so if that's 1 day turnaround time on results, okay, that's the trade-off we made.
That's good. I had a lot of high parallelization that I executed at a previous employer as well. And the fun thing about that automation suite was it was dual purpose used for load testing. Also, it would cause so many problems in the application that they actually wanted me to turn down the parallelization. It was a good experiment. I loved it.
Same thing happened.
I know. It's a common problem we face into, right? So definitely. So for us in the current thing, automation is going up so well, but still we are seeing some visual bugs pushing into prod, because when we test into different environments, not the same person keeps on testing it. So when it go for a smoke test, we really don't know what's changed. So automation passes, everything passes, but still there are few bugs which are visually impacted. So that's where we came into Applitools, and then we liked it and how it is working. So once the initial test is done, we will take a Applitools baseline. And then when we go to next environment, automation will be running up. and then rerun the baseline into the next environment to make sure nothing else which we don't know has encountered into that environment. As you know, the environment issues will be there. Maybe it's a data issue or like environment issue or anything. So that's how we reduced half of our production issues coming into our scope. And especially, the time frame that comes for testing is very minimal. And that too, they come in the last minute. So imagine those type of critical things, how those happen. So definitely including the visual comparison with the automation and little bit of our physical as eyes check and everything, we can make this automation perfect. We can't say that alone running the automation scripts, we can be doing 100%. Again, these data issues will come up or any other load issues.
Yes, I agree with that. The root cause analysis is really important, right? If for some reason you have an issue in production, then it's important to create a scenario that tests that particular issue, right? So once you get the fix, then you are handling different environments. That's why you have development, you have stage, and you have production, right? So basically, you validate that the scenario and you introduce the test case that makes sure that this doesn't happen again in the future. And again, it's important to test strategies, different strategies. As Harika mentioned, we have visual testing, so we can pass these same scenarios with different kind of strategies. We have API testing, we have component testing, we have a lot of strategies that we can apply. And it's pretty much like the TDD, right? There's first you create the test, you make it fail, and then you make it pass. This is the same that you can apply in these big components, right? Every time that you can discover a bug or an issue, write a test that is testing that particular issue, reproduce that issue, and then make it the fix in development, then move into staging, and then is ready to go live in production, right? So that's the strategy that we are using in Domino's.
That's a great strategy and a common theme for all of us, right?
Thanks. Yes.
Yeah, common theme for all of us. This is great. One of the things that I wanted to go back on to what Harika said, excuse me, I stumble on your name again, I apologize. You talked about the visual validation. What we have done with the visual validation test cases is we've actually got other members of the team involved in evaluating the baselines of those. So we have UX teams that are involved with figuring out what the baseline should really look like. They're the ones that are the big proponents of look and feel, is what I call it, of the application. And so again, we're using the machines to do the work for us, but we're getting other human eyes on that. And it takes away some of the responsibility of the testing team so that they can focus in on functional testing or performance testing, security, whatever. It's just the cohesion of the teams that we use. And the UX teams actually really enjoy interacting with the Applitools interface and being involved in the quality validation of the applications.
Yeah, I do like that too. We can log those defects and everything directly from there. So as you said, Mike, even in our thing, developers go in and they do validate and they do identify those things. And UX team and the account teams go and validate if it's something issue comes up, what they agreed and what was accepted for this is correct or not. So it's like a complete thing. Anyone can access and everyone can directly log the defects from it. So it reduces our time. Sorry, Andy, did I cut you?
It's okay. We keep colliding. It's all good. No, but like y'all said, something that I really do dig about visually based results, like the ones that Applitools provides, is that it is a barrier breaker. You know, for so long, I'm sure y'all have felt this pain. It's like tester goes off in their corner and they run some tests and they poop out these results, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. Or it's like they try to the simplification is you get this giant TV screen mounted on the wall before we all work from home, right? We see the TV screen and it's either all red or all green. And it's like that's the state of things. Make it green, like, but it's very inaccessible. You're either people are just being reported status, they have no insight into it, or it's just too much. It's too granular. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Snapshot's worth 1,000 assertions. It's like you can just bring in folks, BAs, POs, UI, UX, developers, managers. They can look at it and be like, oh crap, the button's gone. Oops. Right? It sets that level playing field. It makes things much more collaborative, much more accessible. The fact, like you'll say, it's like, we just mark the bug in there. Boom, done. Pretty cool.
Indeed.
Awesome. So let me shift topics a little bit here. So let's talk about test data. We talked about a little bit in some of the test cases we were doing. How do y'all manage test data in your test projects? I know test data can be a nightmare. I've given a whole talk about that. But I want to hear like real world, street smart, practical strategies that y'all have done to try to manage this nightmare.
So definitely test data is the huge thing. I know Mike feeling. I can totally understand. So even though how much test data we create, we won't be able to replicate the production issues what we get into. So definitely encourage to take the production data, mimic the PII concept and everything to reuse the production data will give you the exact solution what you are finding. How many test data you create and how much you make sure you are able to cover all the scenarios. There may be ETBT 1 or 2 scenarios which will be causing a lot of issue for your automation script. So definitely if you can capture the production data and then mock the PII information, and if we use this, we will be able to do 100% for our testing efforts.
Yeah, testing data is an interesting topic also. And if you think about testing data, is again thinking about environments, right? We have different environments, and thinking about an automation that you can place in your corporation, how you can easily inject different kind of data. If you are in development, you want certain data. If you are in staging, different data, and in production as well. That's one thing. So that requires design and a good strategy for the automation. The second thing is what happens with dynamic data. And with dynamic data, I mean, think about different stores, right? Different stores can have different menu. If you are in a store that is in the United States, it's a different menu than if you are in Mexico or if you are in a different country. So maybe for that particular data, you want to hit APIs. So you can request what is the menu that we have in that store. So thinking about data is data that you can get from your configuration, you can get from APIs, you can get from database, you can get from JSONs, right? So it's a huge topic. And another topic is how we can generate randomly data, like emails, customer names, phone number. It could be random, but still it needs to be valid data, right? So in Domino's, we're using different kind of products like Mailosar is a great product for testing emails. Another is JFairy. This is a tool for Java for generating random data. And we have custom data generators. And we need to make sure that the data we are using for our testing strategy is valid and is a good replication for our products.
Yes, well said. From our perspective, or Everfi's perspective, the QA team here, we have taken a variety of different approaches. One, we do look at production data to see how we can utilize it in lower environments where possible due to PII. Those are the types of things you need to keep aware of. There are some legal ramifications associated with that. So we have used production data from time to time where it's appropriate. Additionally, our test cases will actually create the records that we need to use. So we do on-demand file creation, or not file creation, but record creation in the database. while the test is executing. So part of the setup process would be to create a teacher record as a scenario that we might need to be able to execute some flows associated with the teacher. As part of the teardown process as well, it would destroy that record to keep our database clean and help the stabilization of our tests to execute cleanly. We also have a technique where we actually auto-generate test cases that utilize the data to build the test case for it. So it's a combination of building data and test cases and auto-generating that for an internal tool that's been built here that we call Modelo, that auto-generates test cases from data and then executes them, which is great. Dynamically creates test cases for us that way with the data. Previous employers, I have actually used the application's backend data. I would query that data to then execute the test cases using that data to exercise the functionality of the application itself. So I didn't have to create data, but I would query the backend data to execute it, which was actually quite exciting and fun because we could do lots of different styles of testing based on the data that we could see.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to mention about all of this is it's very specific to your domain and your feature. So it's really hard to prescribe like one strategy for you to use, because if you're on a heavily like UI-based team, you want to have like some confidence on the test data that you're getting. Like you can mock the responses that you will be getting from the backend, but how to guarantee that those mocks are still fresh, that those mocks still make sense over time? Like we have many like UI automation tools these days that you can intercept the response and you can inject whatever test data you want. You can use fixtures at the UI level, but that it's only testing so much on the UI front. Like you still need to cover the actual contract between backend and front end and make sure that those things are still valid. Like have a way to refresh your test data from every now and then, or make sure that you're still conforming to this agreement you had between the two parties. So it's really hard to really say like do this or do this other thing. Like for some companies it will be, or some features rather, like importing like a production. The production data would be enough to provide a snapshot of that, but you still want to exercise some creativity to change your data to test some other scenarios that maybe not even production will have. For instance, names, as I think Jose, you mentioned that. I saw some name validators in the past where they would only accept names that were like 2 letters or longer, or 3 letters and longer. But if you're coming from some different culture where your name can be 1 letter or 2 letters, it will just fail. So it goes beyond just like using the production data. It's really about understanding your requirements, understanding your domain, your customer base, again, to see like what makes sense to be exercised. I'm like myself, I have a .info domain that I use for like all my domains subscriptions, accounts and subscriptions. And I remember for some time, .info was new, and it's a 4-letter long domain, TLD. And some services would just reject my email because it was not a .com, .org, .net, or .br. I'm from Brazil, so I had also like a .com, .br email address. And was that a failure to project what that test data should be for that email validation functionality? Were they looking for hard-coded values or like just by on the 2-3 letter domain names or not? So maybe it was a test data miss. Maybe it was an understanding of how emails work in general, but it's just a matter of knowing how something should behave and then creating the variations that you need to test. Again, like gauging the risk, gauging how important it is to have those scenarios tested.
Man,
Well said.
yeah.
Well said, Felipe. Those are some of the fun testing issues I like to find out in the production world. Like, oh, this isn't accepting this style of an email. Well, let me beat on this for a little bit and see what it does.
Yeah, and again, like back to tools, like there are tools you can use to leverage your testing, right? Like you may not know what an email domain looks like, but then you have a tool that will generate those emails for you, and then you just use that. Or the names, like I don't know what names look like in certain countries, so let's use a data generation tool to do that. Like I may not have that in production, so help me giving ideas so I can work on and prioritize accordingly to see if I need to test that scenario or should I have an automation around that scenario or not.
So there is a question that I do want to ask you panelists, and it's also a question we've asked our audience in the poll. And in fact, we've got the poll results here. Is it better to use real production data, mocked data, or synthetic data? Clearly, the audience is favoring production data, but I want to hear what y'all think on the panel.
Well, I think, again, like I said, it's a mix, like it's a balance of identifying what's out there in production and what could be missing, what you can try in addition to the production data. It all depends on the system as well. Like if you're testing like an e-commerce platform, like can you afford to do like a testing outside of the sandbox and using like real credit card information, real addresses? Like probably not. Like you want to use a sandbox environment as much as possible because there is some liability to using production data there. But then if you're not using the production data, at what level are you using it? Like, are you talking more about like the UI perspective? Because then you can validate more variations using mock data than real production data. But I think the point is not just beyond what kind of data, but really the production usage that you can infer from that data. Like, for instance, you don't want to test all the combinations of things out there, all the input possible. It's an infinite surface area. So you have to be informed by that production data, and not just inform of the data itself, but the logging that you may have for the product to inform what to focus on. Like you may think that like this part of the app is important, but then you see that nobody actually goes there. Like there's a funnel and people are falling off along the way. So you don't have to use use the production data to see that people are not paying as much attention to this feature and then investing to some other part.
Jose, Harika, what you think?
Yeah, I would say in my previous experiences, we use the mock data and any of the scenarios where it's really bothering in the production, those particular scenarios we used to get the data from the production and we used to test around those things, because as at any cost, we are not able to test all the 100 scenarios at the same time, right? So we use the mock data, and as Philippi mentioned, which is a grade, like we need to see what are we trying to achieve and what are the scenarios we need to make for the perfect situation. How we are dealing it depends. It actually depends upon what is need to be achieved. And so we use the mock data, and whenever we have scenarios that is breaking up with any of the particular functionality or anything, that we used to get the data from the production and try to break the system and again fix the system again to make sure that nothing is breaking up. So it's a mix.
Yeah, as they mentioned, right, it's a mix. I understand the production data because it gives you a good understanding what is the market, what the market is saying, and what the information that you can use for your scenarios. However, it's also important to have a clear idea how to mock data, because we don't want to use real customer names. We don't want to use real phone numbers. We don't want to use the real emails. And I'm not going to talk about any payment information, right? We cannot do that. However, we need to do a strategy to use valid data for the system, because all the system has validations. So then it's important to think about your scenarios, understand the business, understand the products, and then that will give you a clear understanding how can create my data for these scenarios, for these test cases.
So me, right?
If you want to jump in, I won't stop you.
So I would echo the same as my friends here on the panel. It's conditional based on what you're trying to achieve. I did answer that poll question though, and I did say production. So I'll give you some transparency, because there is sometimes when production data is necessary to recreate a problem in a lower environment that you can't get the data set somehow. Like there's some weird anomaly that happens in production and you can't reproduce that. And so I can see some value in using production data where it's legally allowed to make sure that you can recreate that in lower environments and then get additional test cases in place or bugs filed at a lower level where it's quicker to solve the problem.
Awesome. So I'd like to shift gears again a little bit. We were just talking about how test data can be such a challenge when it comes to running our tests, reproducing issues, the whole setup thing. What are some of the other greatest challenges you faced when trying to run tests, and specifically when trying to run tests continuously?
What comes into the first in the mind? Dynamic elements. So definitely those dynamic elements should be taken care. So luckily now Applitools have those, what is it called? Self-healing cloud system. So which can be helping us to ignore all those dynamic elements, which is a flaky script again, because we need to keep on updating and maintaining those scripts. So those things, test data and the continuous integrity, whatnot, all those things will come into the picture. So yeah, those are the other things which we can make sure now, because of this self-healing elements, we can reduce the half of our painful job.
So in the industry, we have two kind of strategies, right? The smoke testing and regression testing, basically. And I'm going to talk another idea from Martin Fowler. And Martin Fowler said, run all your test cases. And that's true. Even though if you are running those test cases at night, regression, or smoke before you deploy a new product in development or staging, run those test cases, those strategies. But the another thing is, it's really important maintenance, right? It's not important. I'm going to run all these bunch of test cases, but it's more important to do an analysis for those test cases. If it's green, what that means, if we have some failures, it's again, it's an environment issue, a new feature that is broken, something that is not working well. So it's very important to understand that particular execution, right? So having a passing ratio very high and have some minimal failures gives you the opportunity to do an analysis more easily. And I'm going to introduce something that we are doing at Domino's as well. So let's imagine that you have a failing scenario, right? What if you have a resilient strategy to run this particular scenario with a different strategy? We have in the market several tools, right? We have WebDriver.io, we have Playwright, we have Cypress. What happens if you have a failing scenario and then you run the same scenario with a different strategy? That will give you the opportunity to get more information, to get different logs. Maybe with another strategy, you are capturing videos or screenshots, right? So you will have more information about what is your test cases failing, and that will provide you the feedback that you need to go directly with the problem.
That's very interesting. Never heard of this idea of running the same task in a different tool, because it does feel to me that it may be hard to maintain two different tools or have parity between the two. So I'd love to hear more about that. One thing that we do is we have the same task running on pre-merge and post-merge. So on PRs, you can see if anything failed, and you can compare against the main branch as well to see if that same task that failed in your PR also failed elsewhere, or failed, well, not just in main, but for other PRs that are also running around at the same time. We do employ some retry strategy as well, so that we can, if it's failing now, we can see if it's always been failing. We have historical data for the pass rate for each one of the tests that we run, so we can easily compare and see if it's a transient issue or if it's something that has been around for a while. It can be a dependency that changed, some service that changed something, and now our test at the UI level that's not using mocks. may become flaky, and then you can easily check, okay, it's a transient issue, or it's something that maybe this code change in this PR introduced, or something after merging that caused another change. So, but those are all signals, and you need to interpret those signals and add your input as well to really make sense out of it. It's not fully automated, but some teams did have something like that if a test starts failing, they will mark it as unstable automatically, and then we have like a promotion pipeline that runs to make sure to promote them back to stable once they are green again.
Okay, so I'll be honest here. I'm not a super big fan of the retry techniques that are available out there in the industry. We all have interacted with them. I have done it myself, but I understand the reasons why we would want to do retry logic. I try to avoid it as much as possible because I want to fail fast. And Felipe used a keyword that triggered me a little bit when he said transient issue. Aren't those our favorite issues to try to figure out what's going on, especially when you can't reproduce it in a lower environment? Oh, those are always so much fun. I love spending a lot of time trying to figure out what those are. And then have those issues come back and forth between dev and QA. It doesn't work on my machine. It does work on my machine, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you triggered me there a little bit, Felipe.
Well, one thing that you want to fail fast, that's also can be a foot gun, right? Because if you fail fast, you drop everything you're doing, you try to figure out what's that. And then if you just had retried again, like maybe like within 5 minutes, that would be no problem whatsoever. Like it's just a transient issue again. So I feel like it also depends on what your retrying strategy is. Like if you're just retrying the exact same scenario all the time, then you're only going to be repeating the same results most likely than not. But if you maybe use a different test account, or you vary like some other thing, like what browser version you run, or what other device, like some other variation, like that, the test itself, like it doesn't care much about some of those variables, right? So if they pass, then it's fine. And that's where a retry can be useful. That you're not using static data all the time, but you're still validating the feature itself. And you don't spend much time just dropping everything you're doing to try to investigate something that is maybe one backend down, or maybe a bad network that you're facing for some whatever reason, right? So I feel like there are strategies, there are ways to make it effective, but it all depends on like lots of factors, like what your infra looks like, what your backend look like, what your even like your own deployment system looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I think what Jose was suggesting of trying a different testing tool, I think would be beneficial in that retry strategy as well. So I'm learning some things today. So thanks for sharing, everybody.
Yeah, I want to jump in on the retry thing. We found that to be nearly indispensable at my previous company on that team. Not so much for trying to just gloss over failures or get the test passing, but rather as a mechanism for more information than just a straight pass fail, right? To be like, oh, well, this one, it failed once but succeeded twice. This one failed all 3 times, right? Then to match that along with failure signatures was incredibly helpful, right? On that particular test suite, we had a whole Selenium grid that we were using. And I mean, there were times when there were infrastructure issues, right? that it wasn't the tests or it wasn't the app that was flaky, but the infrastructure was doing something a little questionable. And so we were able to, with all that extra information, we could quickly identify those situations to be like, oh, okay, it's failing a little bit, but it's not a real issue, just a environment issue.
Yeah, I actually like that you added that color to it because while I do say that I'm not a big fan for the retry logic for the get it to pass, it's the history information, what we can glean from that. And if you're able to fine tune your test cases and the data that you're using and utilizing some of these tools that Applitools provides to do self-healing for you when you're running your functional tests within their visual grid or their execution cloud is what they call it. Again, proponent about quality advocacy. The machines will do the work for us. The machines will do the work we tell it to do for us, which allows us to evaluate and look at different environments and allows us to do like what Andrew said. Like our infrastructure was the problem. And if you're able to get to that time level, you can really fine tune your test cases and you can really fine tune your test data to make things move fast and get quality quicker and the confidence there for the team. I've seen it happen, and it was a lot of fun to be able to get to that level because I could spend time breaking it up more and more because machines were doing what I needed it to do.
Nice. So I know we've mentioned the Applitools execution cloud a few times, that whole run it on the cloud, self-healing locator. And I know some of you have actually given it a try. So I want to ask you all about some of your experiences. Jose, you've given it a try, right?
Yes, I did. I was able to test the Applitools Cloud, and I did a demo how this works. It's a great technology. The self-healing is fixing one of the most challenging things in the UI validation, right? That is selectors. So it's the nature of the software. The product is always changing. We're adding new features. We're changing the UI components. So the fact that you have this strategy out of the box, using just Applitools to detect the same component and figure it out, it's not a different component. It's just a different selector, but it's the same. It's awesome. And another thing is that you can save a lot of time for your teams in execution because you don't need even to use internal VMs, right? It's you send all the information to Applitools, and Applitools render for you in the cloud different devices that you need: Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, iPhone, Pixels at the same time. So it's faster, it's more efficient, and reduce flakiness, because at the end of the day, you don't need to maintain that infrastructure. You only use a service that is basically Applitools. So I know that we can use a lot of options. I know that we have several options to use the same. We can easily do visual validation with the libraries, right? There is a lot of options. However, if you select the best tool in the market to do the job, that will increase your execution and your results.
Nice. Yeah, one thing you mentioned there, selectors are hard. Selectors are very hard. It's not only hard to like write good selectors to find the element on the page, but then like you said, when your app changes, or like if you're using some sort of particular framework or platform like Salesforce where it's like dynamic IDs, so much pain. I do want to plug for everyone out there who is struggling with locators. Test Automation University has a course called Web Element Locator Strategies, where we walk through all the different kinds of locators that you will need to write for test automation and how to write good ones. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jose, and thank you all panelists for being part of this. To wrap up here, I think I'd like to just pull in some of the Q&A from the audience. We have a number of questions that people have prompted. Audience, now's your chance. If you want a particular answer in the few minutes we got left, upvote the ones you like. So here's the first question we've got from Tisetso. What data mocking solutions or techniques can you recommend? And again, this is for anyone on the panel who wants to take it. Thoughts?
Well, I guess it all depends on like what level of mocking are you talking about here. Like if you assume that this is, let's say, like the backend mocking to the front end, there are several things you can do depending on that. There's some built-in mocking into the test framework themselves. Like if you use Cypress, for instance, you can intercept the request and then change it or serve something that you know will always be returned that way. You can have like entire mock servers that will basically re-implement the same API calls that your backend would be that will be hitting your backend, but then you always return your mock data for that. You can do it at several different levels. It all depends on which one you're referring to here. And again, it's hard to prescribe one particular over another because it's very specific to your circumstances, your environment. But assuming that you do have like one of those available, I guess the question is, how do you capture the data in a meaningful way, like for that scenario that you want to test, and how do you replay that? And then the mechanism to return the data doesn't really matter much. It's just about making sure that you have the right format for the data you want to mock. And then it can be either one of those routes, like from the front end directly, from the back end. It all depends on what you have available.
All right, thank you. So here's the next question. What test coverage metrics do you use as part of scaling your tests? This is from Brian Maloney. One of our other panelists, what you think? Who wants to take it?
This is actually kind of a tricky question from my perspective, because if you're focused mainly on certain metric, you're going to only focus on that metric. And I'll use my phrase again, as a quality advocate, it's not just about the numbers, it's about how you improve as an entire team. So if we're going to say bug metric is one that's important, then I'm going to project my opinion here, because it's not my employer's opinion or whatever, it's my opinion. It's that if you like inject a bug metric, how many bugs get logged in a day, blah, 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 that's counterintuitive, because me as a tester mind go, well, I can break that metric pretty quickly because I'll just log a bunch of bogus bugs or small bugs, and it's going to confuse the results. So what's funny for me to speak up about metrics, though, is I've had a few opportunities in my career to create a quality advocate dashboard which tracks metrics, and will usually go after the low-lying fruit of number of tests that are running in the suite, time to execution, and flakiness of the test, which provides us a window into the quality itself. Then we start to integrate other metrics associated with GitHub repo commenting. Are the repo PRs getting a lot of comments? That's a metric that we would look at, because maybe we have a learning exercise that we need to do for the team. It's a education opportunity for the team to say, oh, well, this person has had 20 comments as an example, and it's all focused around, let's say, as an example, the locator strategy. That's an educational opportunity for the team to provide additional training associated with a locator strategy, as an example. So I look at it as a whole. Yes, low-hanging fruit of easy numbers like pass-fail rate is good to start the conversation. And then once you start the conversation, you actually can pull out more meat to the metrics that are important to the folks that want those metrics. To describe what that metric is today, say, do this, it's hard to say.
I really like what you said about tracking the execution time, because I feel like it's directly related to scaling up, right? As you increase your test suite, you have to be able to scale up and run more tests in the same amount of time. So if you don't have a sense of how long things are taking or how many tests are running or anything like that, it's really hard for you to come up with this scaling strategy. You can be as easily as just like setting a flag on a test runner to run more tests in parallel. It may be more complicated, like adding more servers to run. And then it could, I think it was Harika who mentioned that you can also inflict some self-harm if you end up paralyzing too much. And then you call the DDoS on your own internal services. So it's good to know like what you're optimizing for. Like is it time? Is it budget? Like what is it? that you can play around to scale up correctly.
Cool. Alrighty, here's the next question. This is from Mike Verinder. Good to see you here, Mike. In a heavily automated environment, should you always have test cases written out in English or just high-level scenarios? Erica, Jose, either one of y'all want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take it. So, what I would suggest is what type of framework you decided to use it. It should be all in the same format. So, it's not high level, like the main critical test case or like a simple functionality validation. Use the same format, same framework, so that when whoever is checking it up or backing it up, they can understand the format and structure. And also, it depends upon the what type of knowledge the team has. So we should always maintain the similar format, not like critical functionality will go as one type of BDD structure and the other one will go as the basic structure. So which will impact in the large run for analyzing if something breaks up and whoever wrote is not here. So other remaining people, the team has to take care of it. So any framework, whatever framework you decide, everything should be in the same flow. That way we can maintain the stability and also functionality and however it works. Any other ideas for anyone?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. There was an exercise that I used to do with the team as we were onboarding them into the automation framework itself. So I would present them with a scenario, whatever it was. And their first task was to understand what that scenario was. And then I had them write out in English, plain text, whatever language they spoke, what are they going to do? So navigate to, enter this, click that type of scenario. So it helped build the foundation around the scenario before any code is written, because the framework was doing most of the work for them. But if they didn't understand the foundation, it was going to be tricky for them to understand test code logic. So I used to do that type of exercise, like write it out before you even write any code. That helps them understand, and we could evaluate different test scenarios that they could for that particular scenario the example scenario we were using.
Great. So we have time for one more question. Any thoughts on resilience testing using chaos engineering approach? I want to direct this one to Jose.
Sure. As I mentioned, right, this is important to have a good strategy, because at the end of the day, we are testing a good product, and our product and our strategy should be high quality as well. So I agree with another panelist regarding to it's not a good idea to test the same scenario, right? That is something that I want to avoid as much as possible. But it's important to use that particular feature to be resilient, right? So if for some reason one particular step or one particular validation fail, how can execute the same validation with different approach so I can get the information that I need to see if my product is working as expected or I have an environment issue, right? That's resilient. If we have in the microservice world, right? If for some reason one particular service or one particular server is failing, we have another that can provide the same service, and the user is not noticed that. So in the industry, we have different kind of strategies to doing that. We have Jenkins pipelines. We can get decisions based on that logic, right? We can create Groovy scripts, and with Groovy scripts, you can decide, okay, I'm going to execute this, and if fail, I'm going to execute this. And then I'm going to get the information that I need. Maybe in the first execution, you don't take videos because it's very high resources consumption, but maybe it makes sense in the backup strategy, right? So you have a resilient strategy to test your products. So that's my advice in that particular topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jose. Well, we are fast out of time, so I'm going to hand it back to Pam to close out this event.
Thank you so much, panel, for sharing your insights and sharing your experience. I think our audience learned a lot. I love the questions. I also love the fight going on in the chat right now. Being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.